All right, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from today. My name is Sam Constance. I'm an assistant director for alumni career development with the University of Chicago. I'm so happy that you're able to join us for today's session all about your blind spot. Is your blind spot getting in the way? And it's featuring a speaker who's presented several times for our department and is a wonderful contributor to our programs, Keith Sbiral. Keith is a certified career development and career transitions coach and team development and leadership consultant with Apochromatik. Keith helps professionals conquer their career and career transition challenges, as well as goal achievement, time management, long-term career development, team and leadership development, executive presence, and more. He has nearly 2 decades of experience in municipal government management, including serving as city manager for a Chicago suburb. He earned his master's in urban and regional planning from the University of Iowa and his bachelor's from Luther College. Keith is also an avid photographer, a traveler, and often works with those in creative fields on goals or blocks related to creative pursuits. His career advice has been featured in media, including Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Forbes, Glassdoor, and Monster. And without further ado, it's time for me to turn it over to Keith. But first, I want to set a few expectations for this session. One, we want this to be engaging. We feel like you learn more when you're able to interact with the U Chicago alums around you. So if you're comfortable, I encourage you to turn your camera on and get ready for some interaction. And then if you have any questions throughout the session, you can send them in the chat. We'll have a moderated Q&A at the end, but this again is meant to be conversational and it's meant to give you an opportunity to really ask the questions that you have and get those answered in the session. So I hope that you will take advantage of that today. So Keith, that is enough from me. Let's hear from you.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what we're here to talk about today. Okay, so and I've got a couple slides here, not too many. We'll turn them on and off as we go. But I am, as Sam said, Keith Sbiral. I own Apochromatik, and I work with teams and individuals to develop their skills, find their focus, and go farther faster. I work with clients on team and leadership development, emotional intelligence, executive presence, all of these type of things that go together to create kind of your presence or your ability to lead. Now, my background is in management. I served in municipal government, as Sam said, for almost 20 years. But I, with my partner, formed Apochromatik about 4 years ago. So I'm a certified professional coach, and I'm also a blind spot navigator, and that is specific to an assessment that we use at Apochromatik. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But as you can see from the photos on the slide, in my free time, I enjoy travel and documentary photography, and other creative pursuits. So from time to time, I do work with folks dealing with creative blocks as well. One thing I'm sure that's identifying, one thing I'm sure of is that identifying and correcting for blind spots can make you a better and more influential leader. And that's our goal today. So it's a little bit of a different approach to a seminar like this, in that I'm going to tell you a lot about the blind spot assessment and where you're at, and then leave a lot of this up to you to take the next step and go and read the report that you get, because we're going to invite you all to take an assessment and that'll give you some information, and then implement that on your day-to-day life. So that's what we're here to talk about today: blind spots. And it's a crucial part of building any career trajectory, forming a leadership style, and maybe most importantly, it's critical to get what you want. Now, when you think about it, you're negotiating to get what you want every day in all kinds of different settings. And so being aware of your blind spots behaviorally is a very helpful tool. So what is a blind spot? Well, Britannica says that a blind spot is, quote, a small portion of the visual field of each eye that corresponds to the position of the optic disc, also known as the optic nerve head, within the retina. There are no photoreceptors, cones and rods, in the optic disc, and therefore there's no image detection in the area. No image detection. So that gives us our first clue, right? If there's no image, blind spots are obviously difficult to observe. You don't see anything there. So keep that in the back of your mind. They're difficult to identify, difficult to observe. Now, we all have blind spots, every one of us, and you probably don't notice your blind spot because your other eye makes up for it, right? We're talking about literally physically our blind spots. So each eye sends data to your brain on its own, and your brain fills in what's missing. What one eye doesn't see, your other eye does. And experts aren't sure how your brain fills in the details, but they believe it's a mix of processing what it thinks it's missing and reusing electrical bursts from around your blind spot. So our second clue here is that blind spots are hard to see and difficult to notice because we're constantly compensating to not see them. So I want you to do a little exercise, and this will work best. Uh, you don't have to have your camera on, so everyone can be comfortable with this. But it'll work best if you set the slide to be larger than my image, however you have Zoom set up. But so you can really see the slide relatively large on your laptop or your computer. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Close your left eye, and with your right hand, or with your right eye, close your left eye or cover it with your left hand. With your right eye, focus on the circle, and then move your head forward and backwards until the plus sign disappears. It takes a little time, but you'll eventually notice that the spot where your optic nerve connects, and you'll see your blind spot. It'll just be a circle with a gray box around it. The simple way to emphasize that we all literally and physically have blind spots. Maybe this is the first time you thought about this, or maybe this is the first time you've tried to identify your blind spot. But you can do it with your, cover your right hand, look at the plus sign with your left hand, and see where your left hand blind spot is as well. I think I see most people not zooming in and out to their laptop anymore, so I'm going to keep going. But you can easily, actually, I didn't credit that in the slide, but I stole that from WebMD, so you can easily go on to WebMD and check out that test after we're done if you'd like. So the key point here is that we can, all identify a literal physical blind spot. The question is, where are our blind spots behaviorally? And what are we missing about our lives because we're not checking in and really thinking about what's going on from in a day-to-day perspective? And I think more importantly, when you realize you've missed something, that feeling that that you have something to modify for or correct for is something that we all know, right? So we can literally probably all relate, if you drive a car, to that pit in your stomach you get when you go to change a lane and realize there's a car right beside and next to you, or right behind and next to you, right? So that the honking, the panic that you almost hit the car, and the reality that, at least in my case, my spouse is there to let me know that that car was in the blind spot. So you feel that notion. Now, many, if not most, automobile companies are utilizing features like video, radar, and new technologies like steering assist to help you see your blind spot as you drive and literally avoid that collision. This is a graphic from Jaguar and their avoidance, their blind spot avoidance system. So that's exactly what we want to do today. We want to help you see your behavioral blind spots. We've seen them in the eye. We know what it's like when we're driving in the car. But the blind spots you have as a leader, an employee, a business owner, a parent, a student, and really in any aspect of your life are the blind spots we really need to identify. Then the next step is to avoid whatever negative ramifications they can have on all of those areas of our life I just mentioned. So, taking this one step further, you can see what blind spots others are demonstrating and adjust your presence and your leadership style and interactions accordingly to achieve your goals more easily. So, this is kind of a two-sided approach. And we talk about the same thing with emotional intelligence. If you are very aware of your emotional intelligence, you can also determine others' emotional intelligence. And that will help you in your communication. And again, to get what we want, whether that be a team that's motivated and driven and working hard to achieve objectives, or whether it's literally getting something and negotiating for something we personally want. So, with that, I'll give you the fact that it's an awfully big task to undertake, but I want to start by giving you a chance to see what your blind spot type is. And so we're going to open up uh, this assessment so you can avoid your blind spots and avoid a collision. Um, we do this by completing the blind spot assessment. So it's only 14 questions and it goes relatively quickly. And it shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on mute and give you all 5 minutes to uh, test out this assessment, and it'll email you a report that'll be, I think, about 7 pages actually, and that'll help you with the rest of our time today. So I'm going to put in the chat. Uh, nope, Amy already did. So the link is in the chat. You can just click on it. I'm going to go ahead and start the 5-minute timer. Go ahead to apochromatik.com/blind spot and take that assessment. Get the email, open it up, and then in 5 minutes, we will come back here. All right. The last 5 seconds. You can keep working on that and finishing it up as you need. A little bit of time. Hopefully, you've all had an opportunity to get on there. Right. So if you want, you can change your name on your Zoom screen, like I did, to Analyzer. Sam is a connector. Amy is a competitor. It looks like. Linda, you're a peacemaker. Um, Amira, connector. All right. So everyone's getting a chance to see what they are, and you'll get that uh, several page description of it in the email. So what I want to do now is, since you all have your results, like I said, this is going to be a little bit different, because if I were to go into detail and explain all of these results to you in this webinar, we would spend the next half hour and I would just be reading slides and going over one by one. This is what a connector is. This is the blind spots the connector have. So I'm just going to assume that you're able to take a look at that. And since you all have your results, you know that you're in one of 8 categories. And I'm going to go ahead and put up right now a description of what those 8 categories are. So as I'm speaking, you can kind of take a look at that and start to understand where these assessment results come from. So I first want to start with a disclaimer. In my work, I like to use emotional intelligence assessments. The EQI 2.0 is the one that I use most frequently. I tend to shy away from any assessment that labels you something. So from a wide angle perspective, I don't think that's helpful. So I don't use strengths finders or Myers-Briggs, because they tell you you are X and you can't be Y. And I've known organizations that leverage strengths finder in particular to the point where people actually uh, they talk like they are their strength, their key strength, and that's how they introduce themselves, and it's really ingrained in the company. And I understand that, and I don't judge that, but at the same time, for the work that we do at Apochromatik, it's far more helpful to select assessments that show you where you can develop and grow. And this assessment, which is uh, a research offshoot of the DISC assessment, uh, certainly does categorize you, right? You've got a type. I'm an analyzer. Looks like Mustafa and I are brothers in analyzing. So we all have this label now behind us. And how do I justify that? The answer is that I use this specifically to identify blind spots and work to change them. And it means that this tool is incredibly effective for that purpose. But what I recommend to clients is, don't take this and run with it like it is the definition of your life, because it is really, I think, focused in scope on looking at blind spots and how they affect what you do. So I wouldn't go around saying, hey, I'm an analyzer, so XYZ, but I do suggest clients leverage the data in the report to receive all of the information as to how they may be interacting with others and how it may be affecting their leadership style and their overall presence and approach to either work or home. So there are 4 primary types shown in dark blue on this graphic, right? The competitor, the motivator, the peacemaker, and the analyzer. And then there are 4 hybrid types in between those primary types. Those are energizer, connector, stabilizer, and controller. Each of these types is a mixture of the 2 primary types they're in between. Now, as you look at this circle, I want you to realize that the types that are across from each other are polar opposites of each other. So that can be where you really have disconnection, or you really have to pay attention to what your what the person you're talking to or what the person you're working with may have to say, and what may be your blind spots in understanding what they're doing. So competitor and peacemaker, analyzer and motivator, really at polar opposites of the spectrum. Now, there's a huge amount of information on this topic, but what I want you to take away is that the thing that is your driver, so if there was one word that kind of uh, drives you in what you do in a daily basis, it's that word that's associated with your type. So for a competitor, your goal is to win. For an energizer, you need stimulation, you need to be activated. Now think about this as how you deal with other people, and you realize that if you're working with an analyzer, accuracy might be really important. So if you know don't really care about proofreading and hand in work product that isn't necessarily accurate, that might be a real frustration for that person. So you can start to see how these things interact. And there's a ton of information in the report, and you can utilize that to move forward. So I know this is a huge amount of information, and it's a different way of presenting this on the topic. And maybe we should lobby Sam and the University of Chicago for a second hour on the topic. But I'm going to assume you'll read the report and download any additional reports or information you wish to read with respect to the details of each type, of how knowing your type can open your mind to specific things you can do to see and address some of your own blind spots. The end of that report actually outlines the blind spots that you might be faced with. And I'll leave this particular slide by saying that this can be a really powerful and transformational tool if you lean into this and think about how you may be missing some things in your life, just like you missed that car that's behind and to the side of you, or just like you maybe never realized you had that blind spot in your eye where you couldn't see the plus sign. So rather than go into depth on 8 categories and tie up your time with that, I wanted to provide you with one additional tool in case you get really into the theory behind this blind spot journey. And I call this the 2-question assessment window. Okay, so what I'm going to bring up here are 2 questions you can ask yourself about another person to at least categorize them in the 4 primary types. So the first question is the person more fast-paced and direct, or is the person slower paced and indirect? And if you kind of pick someone out that you work with or that you have a relationship with, ask yourself, fast-paced and direct, slower pace and indirect. Okay? And that'll put you in one of these 2 categories. Now, the next question you're going to ask yourself is the person more guarded and task oriented, or is the person more open and people oriented? So guarded, task oriented, people oriented, and open, one of those 2. And what we find is that the primary types break down like this. If you're fast paced and direct, you're above the line. And if you're guarded and task oriented, you're to the left of the line. And that makes you a competitor. Likewise for motivator, analyzer, and peacemaker. Now, the data below it is the percentages there are based on a couple 100,000 assessments, and kind of where the population in the United States that takes this assessment break out. So you can see that the competitor and analyzer are rarer than the motivator and peacemaker. So the first thing you might want to do when you realize that is, and you place that person you're thinking about in a quadrant, is that they may see things, interact, and have a completely different leadership style than you. And that's something that you can leverage to have a better working relationship. So I have a couple things that I'm going to go over just for housekeeping. Let's see, it's 12:41. I knew I wanted to save a lot of time for questions. So as I'm doing this, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and Sam's going to take a look at those, and maybe Amy can as well. So if you have questions about all this, please put them in the chat, detailed or big picture, either way. In the meantime, also take a look at this website, aposignup.com/maroon. This is the one we always use for University of Chicago alumni. And at Apochromatik, we have these book bundles, which we curate so that you can relatively quickly read some very appropriate information on the topic in a quick manner. So we'll give away a book bundle of these two books to somebody who signs up there at aposignup.com/maroon. But for everyone else who might be interested, Blind Spots by Kevin McCarthy and Death by BS by Licky Lavji are both really good books, and they do a lot of the leadership in the blind spot space. Their company, Blind Spots Global actually manages the DISC portion, the assessment of the that relates back to DISC that you took today. So I'll leave that up there, and then I want to just talk about a couple resources for you. You can always retake that assessment or have your team take it at apochromatik.com/blindspot. We have Get Stuff Done days where this is off the topic of blind spots, but we focus on kind of virtual co-working where you can monotask and really get some stuff done. If you want to learn about that, go to aposignup.com/GSD. And then we also have a goal achievement seminar coming up in June called Achieve 21 Goalapalooza. And if goal achievement is something that you've struggled with and you want to really have a formula that is successful in working with that, please reach out to us or check out that website at aposignup.com/achieve. So what I'd like to do now really quickly is ask you all to, I'm going to go ahead and stop this share. I'm going to ask you all to just type in a takeaway on this whiteboard that I'm putting in front of you. And you do that by going up to the more section and then opening up the tools to type. Amy, can you actually give a more specific
Sure. So
description of that?
it's so much easier when you're not in the mode that Keith is in. So if you look up where at the top of our screen, it says in green, you're viewing Keith Sbiral's screen. If you click on view options next to that in black, then there's that little button caret thingamajig. Click on that and then scroll down and click on annotate. And then you should be able to, you'll get an edit bar comes up and you can click on the T in the edit bar and then click anywhere in this document and type up a takeaway. And there's always someone for whom Zoom does not want to cooperate when at this stage. And if that person is you today, you can send me a message in the chat and then I can paste it for you. Because I know for some reason, like every single time, Zoom refuses to cooperate for all of the people attending. So you can just do it that way. But otherwise, just click on view options, click annotate, and click on the T for text.
So to summarize, I think the most important thing for everyone to understand is that we all have blind spots. We all have blind spots in how we approach our work, how we approach our leadership. And once you understand that and start to identify them and be aware of them, you can manage them to your advantage rather than have them be a negative thing in your life. So that's I think the moral of the story. We've got an analyzer out there, insightful way to discover blind spots, awareness of other styles and how they match yours. And I think that's a good point, is that, it's just that ability to really be able to work with other people and figure out where they're at. All right. So one person mentioned, what's next, and the fact that you have this report. And yes, like I said, to go through all 8 of these types and to talk about what blind spots that particular type might have would be probably very boring to everyone. But the tool is in your hands, essentially, and it's something that you can consume. And then if you have any questions, my email will be on the end of these slides, and maybe we'll schedule something to do a blind spot session too. I know that we could dig far more into this for sure. Amy, did you have something?
So there were a couple requests to share the last slide. So I think when you're done with that, if you could go back, there was one person who had asked a little bit ago, could you share the wheel again? And I think that's in folks's reports that they'll get in an email, but then also the slide, there was a request to the slide that lays out the 2 questions, so that you can try to kind of figure out quickly, get a better sense of people. If you could show that slide again.
Sam, is there a way that we can give the slides to folks after the fact?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can send an email with the slides if you wouldn't mind just sending them my way, and I can get that out this afternoon.
We'll put a PDF of them together. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing the takeaway, and let's just go to questions, because I think that there's probably a lot of them out there. We'll get the slides out, but I will put that up right now just so that if someone has a really pressing desire to look at it, we'll put that up for a minute, and I'll change it out in a second. But were there any questions in the chat?
Yes, there are. Amy, do you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Perfect. All right. So I know here's one that's really interesting, from Toma, who I know is abroad right now. So this is particularly, I think, useful. But what does culture mean in interpreting these results? How would the results be different, perhaps, for folks living in Europe versus Asia versus in the United States?
That's a great question. So the reality is that culture plays a huge role in all of our work cultures and all of our relationships. And so when, for instance, we do the emotional intelligence assessments, there are different normal groups that we norm the assessment off of. So if we go and you take an emotional intelligence assessment and you are in primarily work in Asia, we will norm your assessment off of a control group of folks in Asia. And that's something that for emotional intelligence we do. This particular assessment is focused on North America. So I think you'll find that, I think what we find is that folks still get an accurate assessment of what their type is, but how that interacts with others can obviously be different in different cultures. So someone who's a bit more aggressive, a competitor who's trying to win, obviously some cultures don't have that drive to win. That isn't the primary goal. And so that would be a very different reaction. So you kind of have to take that into mind when you consider that.
And here's another question about interacting with folks. Waylon asks if you know someone who is perhaps your opposite on this wheel, any tips on how to better work with them?
Yeah, so that's the big session 2 question, right? And that's something that you can either work with a coach with, or you can try to just work with yourself. But if you know where, and this is again with emotional intelligence or with blind spots, if you know where the other person may find a challenge, or where the other person may be different than you, you can actually take that into account and adjust your behavior. So, part of the leadership development is really to lead to the person that you're trying to lead, right? To lead to their strengths, to lead to their weaknesses. And so if you can identify that, once you've identified it, you can tweak your behavior to resolve for those issues. So in the report, I mean, I know you all haven't had a chance to, fully consume the 7 pages or whatever yet, but in the report, it also recommends ways for you to develop better relationships with folks of other types. And again, I really want to make sure I emphasize, we do a lot of work with this. I think it's really helpful, but don't take this to the extreme and become obsessed by the fact that you're, maybe a competitor or a peacemaker or whatever the case may be. The fact that you know that, you can then leverage the components of your personality or of your, your presence to be competitive if you need to. Recognizing that you might not normally be competitive, seeing a space where it's important to be competitive, you can then practice and amp that up if you need to. So,
and maybe to that point, here's another question from Ken. Is it possible that he could be the opposite of the type that he got? He said he's wondering what kind of influence or role or knowledge on how to be that type is opposite of what you got has.
How to become that type?
Yes, I'm wondering about what kind of influence, role, knowledge on how to be that type, opposite of what you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we can get you information on, get you that other report so you can see what that type's report is. But the answer to that question is the development work that we all work on, right? So it's focusing on finding the blind spots you may have that are in that report, and they maybe aren't all applicable to you, but they're things that will likely at some point pop up, and really specifically dealing with those in a way that you can work on and recognize that on a regular basis, and you don't fall into those. And it's something that, whether you work on this or not, you may fall into that blind spot again, but having the knowledge with you and the awareness that you might do it puts you in a much better place to be, to be working with that issue.
Wonderful. Well, if you have any lingering questions, feel free to just come off mute and ask away. Otherwise, Keith, that is go ahead.
I just think one thing to note is that a lot of this is about being authentic, whether it's emotional intelligence or blind spots. It's about being your authentic self and recognizing where you may not see something that you're doing that affects others. And to that end, you can reciprocate that by seeing where they may be doing something that's affecting others, and having essentially a view of all of those playing pieces makes playing the game a lot easier.
Toma, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I noticed it was 14 questions, 4 options. So you're kind of pushed into a corner, and sometimes you may be hesitating between options. And so I was wondering how sensitive the analysis was to this, and also it's like it's so deterministic, right? So I could also pick the answers to kind of push myself into something. So yeah, so how robust is the? I'm guessing you've done some robustness check. So these are my questions there around the test, and it's
yeah, and because it's such a simplistic derivative of the DISC assessment, which is much bigger. Obviously, you can you can pay for a DISC assessment and get a lot of data that's all analyzed. But since it's such a small subset of that and it's only 14 questions, we just encourage you to go with your first gut feeling of how you respond to those questions. And so if you really analyze each question and you really pour over it and you take more than that 4 or 5 minutes that we look at this, you can obviously adjust your results. And one way to personally, I think, account for that, or to see where you may be closer to a different category, would be to just take the assessment again. But I would pay particular attention to the first time you took it and the first time you looked at those answers, because that's going to be a far more I think authentic approach to what kind of results you probably expect.
And so, just as the correct question, you feel comfortable about the sensitivity of the test and how accurate the results are, or in your, I mean,
yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, to the, would I, I mean, it's a 14 question test, so I wouldn't like go changing your entire life based on it. But I think to the extent that it identifies blind spots that are probably common to you, I'm very comfortable with that. And I think that most often with clients, when they read the end of the report there, it says that, the blind spots that may affect you, more often than not, the client will have experienced some of those. So I think it aligns you enough. Like I said at the beginning, I wouldn't use this as a label and print a name tag with it, but it at least gets you thinking and opening your mind to that general direction of where you might be experiencing a blind spot.
Anything to get those creative juices flowing and to lead to introspection, I think is really a helpful first step. Well, Keith, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful session and really insightful, and I'm looking forward to digging into my own report a little bit more. I dropped a link to a survey in the chat. I would love to hear from folks on the line what you thought of this session. Any kudos that you want me to share with Keith is welcome. And then I also ask in the survey what else you want from the University of Chicago. We want to be able to provide whatever is most useful for you in your career journey. So please take a minute or two to share. Otherwise, that is all we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to send a follow-up email with all the links, the slides, the recording, everything. You'll have it all so that you can continue on your introspective journey towards conquering some of the blind spots. Keith, thank you so much. Amy, thank you as well. We're so grateful to have you both as partners.
Thank you. And I'll put my contact info in Sam's email later today. So if you need anything, you can feel free to reach out and email.
Wonderful. Well, have a wonderful day, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.